In 44 BC, the same year Julius Caesar fell to Roman daggers, another assassination north of the Danube changed the course of history. You've never heard of it. The victim was Burebista, king of all Dacians, ruler of an empire that stretched from the Black Sea to the Carpathians, commander of 200,000 warriors. Rome itself trembled at his name. Caesar had been planning a campaign against him when the Senate's blades found him first. But Caesar's assassination was political calculation. Burebista's murder was divine retribution. Called down by a high priestess who discovered too late that vengeance and justice are not the same thing. To understand what happened, we must climb the sacred mountain of Sarmazegetusa Regia in the spring of that year. 6 terraces of stone walls ascending toward the sky. At the summit, 52 wooden pillars arranged in a perfect circle. The Sun Temple, where priestesses had communed with the god Zamoxis for 500 years. The most powerful of these priestesses was a woman named Theophila, 40 years old, eyes like winter lakes. She had prophesied Burebista's rise to power when he was merely a chieftain's son, and she had watched him unite 70 warring tribes into a single kingdom. The historical chronicles tell us what happened next with bureaucratic precision. But they don't capture the weight of the moment when sacred law collided with royal ambition. It began with 12 prisoners, rebels from a conquered tribe who had raided Dacian grain stores. Burebista ordered them executed on the temple's altar stone as a warning to other subject peoples. Public, brutal, effective. There was one problem.
By order of the king,
For 5 centuries, no blood could be spilled on temple ground without the priestess's permission. This wasn't custom, it was divine law. The kind written in stone and consecrated with the bones of kings who had learned painfully not to test it.
He wouldn't dare. Not Burebista. He knows the price.
She was
the
wrong.
gods can witness their crimes.
The executions occurred at dawn on the 4th day of the spring equinox. Theophila stood in the temple courtyard and watched Burebista's soldiers drag 12 screaming prisoners up the sacred steps. General Camosicus led them, a good man caught between his king's orders and his growing unease. Theophila stepped forward. Her white linen robes moved like snow in wind. The soldiers stopped. The general's jaw tightened. For 10 heartbeats, the only sound was the wind through the pillars and the prisoner's desperate breathing. Burebista had not built an empire by backing down. He emerged from behind the pillars, 6 feet tall, scarred from 100 battles, wearing the iron crown of unified Dacia. 53 years old and accustomed to obedience. Theophila did not step aside.
The temple's authority ends. Where the king dealt some begins. Proceed with the judgment. No resistance. Please, mercy. Violate the sacred. Prepare for consequence.
What happened next took less than a minute. The soldiers moved forward. Theophila stood her ground. Burebista raised his hand, not to strike her, but to signal his men to proceed around her. The executions were swift. 12 throats opened. Blood pooled on the altar stone that had stood clean for half a millennium, until it didn't. Theophila watched in silence. Her hands were clenched so tightly that her nails drew crescents of blood from her own palms. When it was finished, Burebista turned to her. He left. The soldiers followed. The bodies remained. That night, Theophila stood before the council of priestesses in the temple's inner chamber. Dicenius, the high priest, her mentor, the man who had taught her every ritual, counseled patience.
The king oversteps, but burning the bridge between throne and temple serves no one. We can negotiate. Sacred law can bend without breaking.
3 other priestesses agreed. They had families in the fortress below. They had seen what happened to those who opposed Burebista too directly. But Theophila had spent 20 years memorizing the consequences of kings who believed themselves above divine law. Every chronicle, every precedent, every cautionary tale carved into the temple walls.
If sacred law can be violated without consequence, then it isn't law. It's a suggestion. And we aren't priestesses. We're decorations.
Dicenius tried one more time.
Think carefully, Theophila. The venomous oath has not been spoken in 300 years. The last time it was invoked, it killed more than the guilty.
Then perhaps kings should stop forcing our hands.
She left the chamber. 3 priestesses watched her go. They knew where she was headed. The grove of Zamolxis lay half a mile down the mountain. Ancient oaks with trunks wider than 3 men, roots twisting through springs that ran red with iron oxide. Priestesses entered alone to receive visions. The air tasted like copper and earth. Even birds fell silent there. Theophila walked through trees that had stood since before the first Dacian king drew breath. She carried a bronze knife and a clay bowl. Nothing else. The venomous oath required 3 things: blood from the one who speaks it, the name of the target spoken 9 times, and absolute certainty. Because once the words left her lips, the gods would not distinguish between justice and revenge. Theophila knelt at the central spring, cut her palm, let 7 drops fall into the water.
Burebista, Burebista, Burebista.
She had 3 more repetitions to go, 3 more chances to stop, to choose negotiation over annihilation. The chronicles record that she did not hesitate, did not waver, spoke all 9 names with the precision of someone who had counted the cost and decided the price was worth paying.
Burebista, 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 Burebista.
The spring water turned black, the trees groaned, and somewhere in the great hall, drinking wine and celebrating the day's display of strength, Burebista felt a sudden chill that no fire could warm. The curse had been spoken. What came next was inevitable. The first sign appeared 3 days later. A golden eagle, sacred symbol of Dacian kingship, fell dead from the sky during Burebista's morning audience. It landed at his feet with a sound like a hammer on stone. Superstitious? Perhaps. But in a kingdom where divine favor determined legitimacy, symbols carried the weight of prophecy. Every noble in the great hall saw it. Every soldier standing guard marked the omen. Burebista ordered the bird burned and continued conducting state business. But his hands shook slightly when he lifted his wine cup, and everyone noticed. Theophila watched from the temple. She felt no triumph. The curse, once loosed, was not hers to control. It was a living thing now, spreading through the fortress like poison through veins.
Priestess, what have you done?
The young acolyte had found Theophila standing motionless at the temple's edge, staring down at the great hall. Her eyes were hollow. She hadn't slept since speaking the oath. But was there? That was the question Theophila had not allowed herself to ask in the grove. And now, it was too late to reconsider. The second sign came 5 days after the first. Burebista's most trusted advisor, a man who had served him for 20 years, dropped dead during a strategy session. No wound, no illness. His heart simply stopped. The third sign, a fire in the royal stables that killed 17 horses. No natural source. The flames burned green. Panic spread through the fortress like plague. Soldiers whispered that the king had angered the gods. Nobles who had cheered the temple executions now avoided Burebista's gaze. Servants made protective signs when he passed. And in the great hall, the king who had united 70 tribes began to see traitors in every shadow.
Someone is behind this. The priestess. The temple. They're using tricks to undermine me. Smoke and mirrors and poison.
My king, perhaps we should make an offering. Seek reconciliation.
Reconciliation? With priests who threaten their own king? I should burn the temple and scatter their ashes.
But he didn't. Because some part of him, the part that still remembered being a chieftain's son who climbed this mountain to seek the priestess's blessing, that part knew. The curse worked through human hands. That's how divine retribution always functions. The gods don't wield the blade themselves. They simply ensure the blade finds its mark. 3 of Burebista's generals, men who had fought beside him for decades, gathered in secret. Kamosicus was not among them. He had honor. But honor was becoming a liability in a court consumed by fear.
The king is cursed. Every day he lives, the curse spreads. To his generals, to the kingdom, to U.S.
What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we cut out the rot before it kills the whole body.
They moved quickly, not out of ambition, out of terror. They believed, with the certainty of desperate men, that removing Burebista would lift the curse. They were wrong. On the 23rd day after Theophila spoke the venomous oath, 3 generals entered Burebista's private chambers under the pretense of reporting border movements. The king received them alone. The assassination took less than a minute. 3 blades, 17 wounds. The king of all Dacians died on the floor of his own bedroom, choking on blood and disbelief. When Kamosicus discovered the body an hour later, he did not weep. He simply closed the king's eyes and whispered a soldier's prayer, knowing that the kingdom Burebista had spent 30 years building was already dying with him.
May the gods forgive us all.
The news reached the temple before dawn. Theophila heard it from a breathless messenger. a stable boy who had run up the mountain in the dark. She stood in the temple courtyard. The altar stone was still stained with the prisoner's blood. Burebista's blood now joined theirs. Miles away, but connected by the curse she had spoken. She had achieved her goal. Sacred law had been defended. The king who violated it was dead. So why did her hands feel cold?
It's done. It's finished.
But it wasn't. Curses don't stop when their target falls. They keep spreading, consuming everything in their path like wildfire through dry grass. By the next morning, Burebista's kingdom began to fracture. 5 regional commanders each claimed the right to succeed him. 5 armies that had once fought as brothers turned their spears toward each other. The unified Dacia that had terrified Rome splintered into warring states in a matter of weeks. Border tribes saw the chaos and rebelled. The enslaved prisoners in the iron mines rose up and slaughtered their overseers. Trade routes collapsed. Famine followed. And through it all, the curse Theophila had called down kept burning. She stood at the temple's edge and watched smoke rising from villages across the valley, heard the distant sounds of battle, counted the dead, hundreds, then thousands, and realized with sick certainty that her righteous fury had done what Rome's legions never could. She had shattered Dacia from within.
I only meant to punish him. Only Burebista. Not this.
The venomous oath doesn't discriminate. It destroys the guilty and the innocent alike. I tried to tell you.
The old priest stood beside her. He looked a decade older than he had a month ago. The temple was empty. Most of the other priestesses had fled when civil war erupted. And then, the final realization struck Theophila like a blade between the ribs. She had become what she condemned. Burebista had sacrificed sacred law for his empire's survival. She had sacrificed thousands of innocent lives for sacred law's vindication. Different justifications, same corruption. Power had revealed who she truly was, and the truth was monstrous. 6 months after Burebista's assassination, the Dacian kingdom that had once commanded 200,000 warriors existed only in memory. 5 petty kings ruled 5 shattered territories. They called themselves Burebista's heirs, but they spent more time fighting each other than defending against Rome. The enslaved tribes were free. That should have been a victory. But freedom in the middle of civil war meant starvation and banditry. Former prisoners formed raiding parties and preyed on the same villages that had once cheered Burebista's conquest. Everyone suffered. The curse made no distinction between perpetrator and victim. Theophila had not left the temple in 4 months. She performed the dawn rituals alone. Aniava, the young acolyte, had disappeared, probably fled to relatives in the lowlands. Smart girl. The temple itself was dying. 2 of the wooden pillars had been burned by raiders who didn't know, or didn't care, that they were destroying something 500 years old. Dacian tried to maintain order. He counseled the warring kings, performed blessings for both sides of every battle. A priest serving 5 masters simultaneously, trying desperately to preserve some thread of sacred authority. It killed him. Not a blade or a curse, just exhaustion. He collapsed during a winter ceremony and never woke up. 72 years old. The last person who had tried to stop Theophila from speaking the oath.
I'm sorry, I should have listened. I should have...
But apologies couldn't raise the dead, couldn't reunite the kingdom, couldn't undo the venomous oath that had achieved exactly what she'd asked for, and destroyed everything she'd meant to protect. The historical record grows sparse after this point. We know Sarmazegatusa Regia was raided twice in 43 BC. We know the Sun Temple burned. Whether by accident or malice, the chronicles don't say. We know the 5 kings who claimed Burebista's crown spent the next decade bleeding each other dry, until Rome simply walked in and claimed the remnants without significant resistance. Dacia would not rise again for another 100 years. But there's one final detail, a strange one, discovered by archaeologists in 1924. On the temple's central altar stone, the one Burebista had profaned with executions, someone carved an inscription. Deep cuts, deliberate work. The stone was later destroyed in the temple fire, but a Jesuit priest sketched the text before it burned. The inscription was in Old Dacian, a confession. It read, "I called down justice and unleashed slaughter. I defended sacred law and murdered a kingdom. I was right and I was wrong. Power corrupts the righteous faster than it corrupts tyrants, because we never see ourselves becoming what we condemn." It was signed with Theophila's name.
The altar fragment.
No one knows what happened to her after that. The chronicles go silent. The temple burned, the priestesses scattered. The grove of Zamolxis, where she had spoken the curse, was cut down decades later by Roman engineers building a road. Some legends say she walked into the forest and never returned. Others claim she joined the enslaved tribes she'd inadvertently freed, and spent the rest of her life trying to feed the refugees her curse had created. The truth is probably simpler. She carved her confession into stone, ensuring it would outlast her, and then disappeared into the chaos she had helped create. A high priestess who learned the oldest lesson too late, that vengeance and justice are not the same. That power reveals our worst selves as easily as it corrupts our enemies. That sometimes the greatest act of courage is not wielding the power you possess. Burebista built an empire through strength and died by the blade. Theophila defended sacred law through divine wrath and watched it consume everything she held sacred. 2 people, 2 justifications, same corruption. Theophila learned that truth too late. Her curse succeeded, her kingdom burned, and her confession, carved into stone with the same hands that had spoken the venomous oath, outlasted them both. Some warnings are written in blood, others in ashes. Hers was written in both. The Dacian kingdom never recovered. Rome absorbed the fragments within 2 generations. The priestesses of Zamolxis vanished from history. The temple on the sacred mountain crumbled to ruins, where archaeologists would dig through the rubble 2,000 years later, searching for echoes of a civilization that destroyed itself. They found Theophila's confession, and they found the altar stone, still stained dark after 2 millennia. Some stains don't wash away. In the end, Burebista was right about one thing. His empire didn't last 1,000 years. It barely lasted a generation. But Theophila's warning, carved into stone in the language of a dead kingdom, that survived. A testament to the truth that power corrupts everyone who wields it. even those who believe they wield it for justice.